Hi there, and welcome to another of our fishing tips videos. These now all form part of the RDAA Better Fishing Academy. This is where we help our members and other local anglers develop their fishing skills, learn new techniques in order to catch more, bigger and better fish, and then hopefully develop a lifelong love for our great sport. In this episode, we're going to show how to fish your bread effectively, how to, in particular, create your bread feed in such a way that you can get it to where the fish are lying, but without overfeeding the fish. That's very easy to do with a bait that's filling as bread. The first thing to say is that bread catches almost everything, and almost in any country in the world. There's scarcely a fish that swims that won't at some point take a liking to a piece of bread. So many anglers, though, lack the confidence to use this simple bread as baits. They worry that it doesn't stay on the hook. Well, we're going to be covering that. They're unsure how to feed it. We'll be covering that as well. And hopefully we'll give you the confidence to use this cheap but incredibly effective bait and add it to your fishing armoury. And if you want to know more, please take a look at the other two videos we've produced recently. One on tips for winter fishing for chub and the other on bread punch fishing. They're both related to what you're about to see today. So, there are three basic types of bread feed. Liquidized bread, mashed bread, basically stale bread mashed up with water, and dampened breadcrumb. We'll cover all three, but first let's start with how to properly prepare liquidized bread. First, the bread itself. Now, the bread we use for making our liquidized is different to the bread we use on the hook. You want the cheapest own brand supermarket bread you can get, medium white sliced. If you can get it for 50p a loaf, even better. I like to dry it out for a little bit, so I usually make the liquidized the day after I bought it, and then overnight I rip some holes in the polythene bag and let the air get to it, just so it's a bit too dry to eat really. That crumbs up better. Next thing you need to do is to make it into pieces this big. So for liquidized bread, you need to cut the crusts off. The canal anglers who like their crumb really fine will cut the crusts off all four sides. Frankly, for the sort of river fishing I do, I find two sides are fine. And then chop the bread, ready to go into the food processor. Now, these crusts are not wasted because they go into this bag along with any other old stale bread from the house, and that will make my mashed bread later on. So there's the bread. The other piece of equipment we obviously need is the standard food processor, polythene bags, and most important of all, a maggot riddle. Not for maggots, but for bread. And I'll explain why in a minute. Okay, time to make a noise. So, 6 or 7 slices into the blender. And I like to try and do this when my wife Natalie's out because she hates the noise. Right, that'll do for now. Open that up. Tip in with the stuff we did earlier, good blue pizza style. And there is liquidized bread. Now, a lot of people will use that, but it's got a lot of big filling lumps in that haven't successfully been mashed up yet. That's where the riddle comes in. To be honest, for roach fishing, that is far too lumpy. For chub, I wouldn't be so worried, but it'd be very easy to overfeed a shoal roach with this. So this is where the riddle comes in. Right, well, this is a bit boring, this bit, but take a bit of your liquidized and run it through a maggot riddle like this. And you'll be surprised just how many large lumps are left over. Don't worry, it won't be wasted, because we're going to put it all through the liquidizer again for a second go. I'll just work that through like this. I should have dried this bread out a bit more actually, it's not blitzed up as well as it should have done. I should probably get the blade sharpened on my processor as well. Anyway, put that to one side. Now you see what we have instead, really nice fine crumb. And if we get the camera onto this bowl of water over here, you can see how it does its magic. In it goes, floats a little bit, and then breaks up. An absolute treat. So that attracts the fish and doesn't feed the fish. That is perfect liquidized bread. Okay, now we move on to breadcrumb itself. I tend to buy the white crumb in a bulk pack of 5 kilos from Blake's Bait in Oxford, but you get it elsewhere. Pretty good value. This stuff is like concrete. Get it wrong and you can ruin your fishing for a day. It's well known that you can use white crumb for binding up a more conventional ground bait mix. But get it right and it's a really useful additive to your feed. Important to recognise that white crumb, when properly prepared like this, still sinks a lot faster than liquidized. So if we look at the jug of water here, the bowl of water here, here's the liquidized again. See how it floats, then sinks, and then breaks up. Crumb is much more dense. Look how it just clonks straight down. Now, because that's been prepared properly, that will break up. So you've got this combination of densities. And what I like to do is to actually combine the two. And this is how you do it. Right, so we pop a bit of our white crumb in a bowl. Next bit of kit you need is one of these atomizers for spraying plants or whatever. And you have to mix this up very slowly, very patiently. Putting the water, you can see that, into the crumb like this. Mixing, 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 mixing. As you can see, it has this tendency to want to clog and lump up. Keep adding the water, stirring it and stirring it until it starts to hold together. When you got to that stage, you then need to push it through the maggot riddle to remove any of the lumps. And then what you can do, this one's already been riddled, but by making a 50-50 combination mix of white crumb and breadcrumb, you actually end up with a really good river mix. So you've got the lightness of the liquidized bread and the, if you like, density of that crumb. So that's 50-50 white crumb and liquidized. That is excellent for flowing rivers, excellent where you've got a bit more current that might make you think, well, if I was to feed liquidized in this swim, it's too deep or it's too powerful, the feed is not going to get down to the fish. By mixing it with white crumb, it does. So it's a great combination, white crumb and liquidized. Hope that helps you catch a few more fish. Right, and now to the most simplest of it all, that's bread mash. As we said earlier, you cut the crust off your white bread for liquidizing, get some brown, any old bits of bread. I just freeze them up, keep them in the freezer, and then get the mash out ready to prepare. I do this all on the bank, but obviously today we're going to do it in the kitchen. So there we have defrosted brown bread, bread crust, bits of rough bread. In it goes. Do this in the bait bucket and leave it to soak for about 5 minutes, and then just mash it all up in your fingers. Mash it all up, break up as much as you possibly can of the mash, and then crucial ingredient, sausage rusk. A lot of people use white crumb or bran. That really does tend to clog it. Difficult to get sausage rusk these days. You need to find a butcher's that makes their own sausages. But if you get a couple of kilos of sausage rusk, believe me, it is the great binding agent. So here's one I did earlier. Save a bit of time. So this has been mashed up on the bank. I would have strained it through my landing net, but I obviously used a colander. And then bind it together with just a little bit of sausage rusk. And so you want it quite sloppy. You want it to good enough to be able to throw to the far bank of the river or wherever you're fishing. And most importantly, it's got to go in, and we just come in there and have a look in this bowl. It's got to be able to go down, and as you can see, it breaks up. A little bit of current in the water, and that breaks up. So this bread mash is a lot more solid, a lot more food value than if you're fishing with liquidized bread or dampened crumb. Particularly good for chub. Fine for roach and other species when you've got a bit of flow and you're confident you've got a decent shoal of fish in front of you. There's a lot of food value in this, but it is a deadly bait, simple to use, but the most important thing is mix it properly and bind it in a way that gets it down without clogging up. Okay, now to the business ends. Hooking the bread and the hooks we use and the type of bread. Personally, I prefer Warburton's, the medium soft white, but any soft white, particularly a processed type of bread, stays on well. Starting with the smallest, most delicate way of fishing bread, bread punch. I particularly like these B911s. They're goods, they're a fine wire hook, excellent for roach and smaller fish, and for fishing smaller bits of punch. If I'm fishing large punches, I've become a bit of a fan of the old Guru pole special. That says 16, it's more like 14. I've got one of these on here. And again, your punches, they're usually brass headed. Drennan do a whole range of them in different sizes. I think this one's about 7mm. And you simply slip your punch on, hook it through the slip, and there you are, punch bread. Couldn't be easier. And for fishing slightly larger baits, fishing flake, of course you can mould it around the shank of the hook as it says in the books, but the great Dave Howes, one of the best roach anglers ever, showed me a much better way of fishing smaller pieces of flake, and that is to take a little piece of bread about the size of your fingernail, fold it in half and give it a little squeeze, and then you hook it through the folded over point, and you end up with a bait like this. Presents beautifully, fluffs up, but most importantly, as you strike at the end of the trot, it comes off. Because who wants to be winding a piece of bread upstream in front of the fish? That's the surest way of telling them they're being fished for. So there we go. B whisker barbs, 520 in the 12, excellent hook for roach in particular. If you want something a bit stronger, I like these B560s. They're again a medium wire hook. Most important thing is they're wide gape. And of course, when you come to ledgering with bread, well, I don't think you can beat a good old wide gaped Camison B983s. We've recommended these many times for chub fishing in particular. So I think that's it in terms of how we present the bait, how we mix it up. Hope that's been helpful, and I hope that puts a lot more fish on the bank. So tight lines. So here we are on a rather lovely little Thames tributary, trying for some chub, and we thought we'd end this video trying to practice exactly what we preach. So here's the bread mash, prepared in the traditional way with the sausage rusk. Make a little ball of it, not much, and just flick that in for the fish. As you can see, it breaks up nicely. Now to hook the bread. So I've got my number 12 hook, and pinch the bread like a maggot. Just hook it through. So no, pinch the bread and then hook it like a maggot. There it is. That will fluff up lovely. All we've got to do now is present it to Mr. Chubb. Hope he's at home. Okay, well, proof is in the eating or doing. Second chub through, bit of bread hooked as described. Not a massive chub, but a nice Thames tributary little chebbin. There we go. The wonder of bread.